It's time to talk stats. In this video, I'm going to predict every stat leader in the NFL for the 2020 NFL season. I'm talking passing yards, passing touchdowns, receiving yards, sacks, interceptions, every stat you can think of. I'm going to predict who is going to lead every statistical category in 2020. Before I give you my predictions for every statistical leader in the NFL this season, Gronk, spike the like button and subscribe to The Bottom Line View for more NFL predictions just like this. Also, leave your opinion in the comment section below. Who do you think is going to lead the NFL in every statistical category? Let's kick it off with the passers, the quarterbacks, the guys throwing the football. Passing yardage, a statistic that I feel has been devalued as of late. I mean, just for example, Jameis Winston led the NFL in passing yards last year. Did that help the Bucs win games? Not necessarily, right? Passing yards is often dictated mostly by volume within an offense, and what volume is also dictated by is winning or losing situationally throughout a season. Teams that are losing in the fourth quarter and the second half of games more often are going to be throwing more passes because they're trying to come back into a game, and that leads to more empty yardage. But there are also quarterbacks and players that simply are just so awesome. And that's who I'm picking to lead the NFL in passing yards. Patrick Mahomes. I'm sorry, I didn't go with an outside-the-box pick here. I didn't go with the tricky selection. I'm not trying to be bold. I'm picking Mahomes. Why? Because this is a team that no matter if they're winning or they're losing is going to have high volume in terms of passing. So it doesn't matter. He's going to have just as many attempts as a Jared Goff or a Matt Ryan or a guy that is passing to get back in a game because Andy Reid loves to pass the football no matter the situation. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a running back who's a better receiver than he is a runner now. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, Sammy Watkins. There's just too many weapons, so much speed, a great schemer at the helm in Andy Reid. And then, oh yeah, Patrick Mahomes is pretty talented. It's just impossible to stop this offense for any stretch or period of time. That's why I'm picking Mahomes to lead the NFL in passing yards. For passing touchdowns, I'm going with a little bit of a bold selection. I'm taking Tom Brady of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's kind of weird to say. Tom Brady in Tampa. Why? Well, let's sum it up like this. Mahomes, Reid, the Chiefs, they love to pass the football down or up on the scoreboard. The same thing can be said about Bruce Arians and the Bucs. Because just like the Chiefs, the Bucs have lots of weapons surrounding their quarterback. And is there a better quarterback in pro football today at dictating matchups and determining the right matchup to throw to than Tom Brady? That's what it's about in the red zone. It's reading a defense, determining a coverage, and picking the right matchup to go to. And when you look at the Bucs on paper, in the red zone, this offense is impossible to stop. I mean, you can't double any singular player. You can't double Mike Evans because Gronk's going to have a one-on-one fade opportunity. You can't double Gronk because Evans. You can't double Gronk and Evans because of Godwin. You can't double Godwin because of Evans and Gronk. You can't double Gronk, Evans, Godwin, although that's impossible because of Cam Brate, OJ Howard. I mean, there's just too many options in the red zone. Big body guys that are great when the ball is in the air, great hands, great body control, great size, great wingspan. I mean, it's impossible. That's why he's going to throw so many touchdowns, because when they get in that area of the field, Arians is going to put the ball in the hands of his veteran quarterback, and Brady is going to put a pinpoint accuracy football on the money for a touchdown. Now let's move over to the runners, the running backs, starting with rushing yards. Who's going to lead the NFL in rushing yards? So there's a couple things that I would look at here for determining who is going to lead the NFL in rushing yards. Obviously, the first and foremost is opportunity, attempts, the amount a team loves to run the football. So immediately you start thinking of teams that they rely on their run game more than others. Second is running back talent. And third, maybe even over the running back talent, is offensive line play. And when I think of all three areas here, I think of the Oakland Raiders, or shall I say now, the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Las Vegas Raiders have a young stud running back who's capable of carrying the football even more than he did in his rookie season. And I'm talking about Josh Jacobs. My pick to lead the NFL in rushing yards in 2020 is Josh Jacobs. Why? Because of all of those things I just brought up. The offensive line is fantastic. They're maulers. They're tough. They're gritty. And Jacobs has the vision and explosive ability to carry the ball behind them. And Gruden wants to feed his guy the ball. That's how they're going to win. They want to keep their defense off the field. They want to grind the clock. And Gruden is going to have his grinder in Jacobs in 2020 just grind that football on the ground for a lot of yardage this year. I think he's a great pick, and personally my pick to lead the NFL in rushing yards. To me, the thing that separates rushing touchdowns from rushing yards is the difference between a great offense and an average or okay offense. I think to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns, you need to specifically be on a very good offense, or at least in a scheme where they give that running back every touch within the 5-yard line, within the 10-yard line, with that opportunity to cross the goal line in a prime situation to get that 6 points. And when I'm thinking about a guy that's going to get every opportunity in the world, every touch when they enter that 10-yard line, I think of Derrick Henry in Tennessee. Now, personally, I do think Derrick Henry, his numbers will come down this year, but I do really like Arthur Smith. I think he can find creative ways, and he's really good in the running game. They want to rely on Derrick Henry's legs to win them football games, especially in big, short yardage situations where he's nearly impossible to stop. He is the best short yardage back in the league right now, and that's why I'm going to pick him to lead the NFL in touchdowns. I don't think he's the best back in the league. I don't think he's the most dynamic, but he's in a good situation where he gets a lot of touches. He's a great, phenomenal power back. And he's in a creative scheme that relies on him first and foremost to score them points. Now let's get to the receivers, the receiving stats, starting off with receptions. Who's going to lead the NFL in catches? In my opinion, it's going to be Davante Adams in Green Bay. Now, you could have easily gone with the repeat with Michael Thomas, once again, to lead the NFL in receptions, and I totally understand that. But because the Saints, I do think, are going to be passing less, running more, they brought in Emmanuel Sanders. They still have Jared Cook. There's some Traquan Smith buzz over there in New Orleans. They have plenty of options to throw the football to, so I don't think they're going to force the football as much to Michael Thomas. Davante Adams, I think, would be a far more impressive pick, and here's why. Michael Thomas gets a lot of manufactured catches in his offense. He often lines up in the slot. He often is wide open on a few catches a game. Not to say Thomas isn't impressive or phenomenal, because he is. But Davante Adams is far more impressive for the catch-by-catch basis, where he's lining up on the outside, he's having to make a contested catch, or he's having to just straight up make a guy miss in terms of his route running, a clean release off the line, and get open, oftentimes being double-teamed. Now, you may say that's a reason he won't lead the NFL in receptions, but when I look at Green Bay, yes, they won't be passing a lot, but they'll be passing more this year because I think they'll be trailing more this year. They won't be a 13-3 football team. They'll be somewhere between 7 and 10 wins, in my opinion. And I think that leads to Rodgers looking for his guy when the game is on the line. A lot of times, that's Davante Adams. As long as he can stay healthy for the entirety of the season, I think Adams has a great opportunity to lead the NFL in receptions because he's the clear-cut alpha in that offense, and he knows how to get open. Rodgers trusts him, and that continuity and chemistry between those two is there. LaFleur in his second season as a play caller and as their coach is going to have a better feel on what Adams does very well and what he doesn't. I think that leads to a lot of catches for Aaron Rodgers' boy, Davante Adams. For receiving yards, it's a little different than receptions or receiving touchdowns. You don't always need a lot of touchdowns to have a lot of yards, and you don't always need a lot of receptions to have a lot of yards either. It's more about the quality within the offense. It's more about maximizing your targets. And while I feel that Julio Jones is not getting as many targets as he used to, he's not catching as many balls as he used to, he's still getting a lot of quality targets, and he's still putting up consistent numbers season after season. Now that Austin Hooper is gone, Sanu gone for the entirety of the season, a running game that I don't quite trust, and a team that's in an even tougher division this year with an okay but not great defense and a really good quarterback in Matt Ryan, I think Julio Jones could lead the NFL in receiving yards this year once again. Of course, he is the all-time leader in receiving yards per game, so that helps. And he's led the NFL in yards a couple times before, so this isn't exactly an outside-the-box pick. But I don't think enough people are giving the credit where credit is due for Julio entering this season. There's a lot of talk about Adams, there's a lot of talk about Thomas, but not a lot of talk about Julio. And Julio, to me, is still the most talented receiver in the league, with no signs that he's slowing down. Given the situation that Hurst is being kind of thrown into this offense, I don't see him getting as many targets or receptions as Hooper did. And just all those targets are in the air, and I think most of them are going to go to Julio, going to filter his way, and that's going to lead to more receptions and more yards for Julio Jones this year. Receiving touchdowns is probably the hardest stat to predict in the NFL from season to season offensively, because you really don't know where quarterbacks are looking. It's just not a very sticky stat. I'd argue rushing touchdowns is easier to predict because at least you can look at numbers and figures when it comes to who touches the ball inside the red zone. You can look at targets inside the red zone for receivers, but it's often like a feel thing or like a skill set thing more than anything for a receiver. Like, of course, slot receivers often don't catch a lot of touchdowns because oftentimes they're quicker, shiftier guys. They're not bigger targets. More times than not, the bigger receivers with the long arms and the long wingspan and the great body control lead the NFL in touchdowns. But there's also guys that typically break off big plays that create touchdowns themselves that often lead the league in that category as well. My pick might be a little surprising to some. I'm going to go with DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, this is kind of a wild pick, but hear me out. Russell Wilson often throws for 30-plus touchdowns every year. He's going to be in the top 5 in that category. I believe the Seahawks will be passing the ball more, especially inside the red zone. And DK is a mismatch nightmare as an athlete. Anywhere. He can take one to the house after the catch. He can beat you deep and score that way. Or he could score on a fade. He could score in the red zone itself. DK is a problem when you get down there. And Russ showed signs at the end of last year that he was starting to trust him even more so than Tyler Lockett in a lot of big situations, and there gets no bigger than the red zone. DK Metcalf is my surprise pick to lead the NFL in receiving touchdowns. The guy is a monster. Now let's switch to the defensive side of the football, where I have 2 categories that I'm going to pick for the league leaders, starting off with the pass rushers, the sacks. Sacks is also a difficult stat to predict. Now, it's a little bit more sticky from year to year. Like a guy like Chandler Jones often has a lot of sacks, and he's known for sacking the quarterback. But as we've seen and as we've learned, sacks don't often dictate pressure, and pressure is more important from a play-by-play basis than actual sacks itself. But nonetheless, it's still a fun stat to predict. My prediction is that TJ Watt leads the NFL in sacks. I think TJ Watt has a great opportunity to win the Defensive Player of the Year this year, given his supporting cast, which is a big deal to me. I don't think you often see a player lead the NFL in sacks that doesn't have great defensive linemen or pass rushers around him, because you need other guys taking pressure off of you and attention away from you to lead the league in sacks, unless you're just amazing. Like, unless you're J.J. Watt in his absolute prime or Aaron Donald, you don't need a lot of help, but you still need a little help. Like, even they had like Whitney Merciless, Jadeveon Clowney, Brockers, those kind of guys, Sue. They had attention taker awayers. And to me, TJ has that, right? Hayward, Tuitt, Dupree on the other side. So he has guys that you can't necessarily double Watt every play. So that's going to single him up for easy opportunities to get after the quarterback. Ben is back, which means they're going to be winning more games. I think they're going to be a good team, which means their defense is going to have to close games. Those are opportunities for sacks when the quarterback is looking to throw the ball down the field more often, more time to get after the quarterback. TJ, I think, is a beast. He's just hitting his prime. He's hitting his stride, and I think he can lead the NFL in sacks in 2020. And the final statistic, interceptions. Interceptions is the hardest stat to predict. And the reason is because it's incredibly random. When I think about interceptions, what I think about are zone cornerbacks who have their eyes on the quarterback, like Asante Samuel, Marcus Peters, Richard Sherman, all good examples. Guys that have great ball skills, have great pursuit ability to play the ball in the air, great hands. Those guys can get a lot of interceptions. Same with safeties, who are also often in zone. They're looking at the eyes of the quarterback. Like, Gilmore to lead the NFL in interceptions last year was wild because he's a man-to-man corner. He jumped a lot of routes and he made big plays. That's incredibly rare. I don't expect that to happen again. I'm instead going to go with his counterpart in Buffalo, who's more of a zone corner, who was also right beside him in interceptions. That was Tre'Davious White. White has better opportunity to get interceptions because I think the Bills are a better team than New England this year. I think they're going to be winning more games. Their defense is very talented. They got pressure up front, which leads to bad decisions from the quarterback. White's really, really, really good, and he plays zone. So he's going to be looking at the quarterback. He's going to be able to jump the ball, and he showed those incredible ball skills last year. White is my pick to lead the NFL in interceptions. Those are my selections for leading the NFL in every statistical category. If you enjoyed, Gronk, spike the like button and subscribe for more NFL. It's Mitch. Peace.